Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott, I'm the Emperor of Stomaria, and today I want to answer the question, how is Stomaria funded? So the very short answer is it is funded in the same way that a lot of other micronations are funded. In this case, by the imperial family, by the founders of Stomaria. This is typically how most micronations go about their business, certainly some of the less established ones, in that they may attract supporters and contributions, financial contributions from their supporters, to some degree or another, but the bulk of the financing comes directly from the founder's own pocket, regardless if they're a president or a king or a prince or an emperor or whatever it may be. So again, the short answer is that Stomaria is funded by the imperial family out of our own pocket. And this has sort of been something that we've been looking at for a long time now, and we have tried to come up with ways in the past in which we can sort of reduce our own contributions to Stomaria, because after a certain point it just becomes more and more unsustainable, in that I'll obviously have to dedicate more funds and resources to Stomaria, to the project, and that obviously has to come from somewhere. And we don't want it to get to the point where it's going to affect our own lives in a negative way. I mean, I like buying flags and banners and air rifles and sabers and uniforms and all the rest of it. It all adds to the character of Stomaria, but it doesn't give us any real world benefit ourselves, me and my family. And so we have tried in the past to come up with ways in which we can raise funds through other sources. And these are the things that I want to talk about. I want to talk about where Stomaria in the past has attracted funding, and what we are doing now and what we're going to be doing in the future in order to fund Stomaria's various projects within the Micronation itself. So it was in the tail end of 2019, I think around November time, I think it was, where we actually allowed for the first time our supporters to contribute financially to the project through GoFundMe. And so we set up a GoFundMe campaign and we raised a small amount of revenue that way. The only issue with this is that it is obviously quite sporadic. It's not a reliable source of income, especially when your supporters only number in the number of supporters that are willing to contribute financially only number in, the single digits or low double figures. So you've got to think of ways in which you can more regularly fund your projects with a more reliable source of income. And so one of the things that we thought of doing is going the way of Norway, in that Norway has what they call a sovereign wealth fund, where the Norwegian government itself actually holds large amounts of shares in the stock market in various companies, and those companies pay dividends, and the actual dividends that Norway receives is then used to fund various public services. I think that's a gross oversimplification of how they work it, but that's the the general idea. And so we thought that we would do something similar. So after the 2020 stock market crash because of the pandemic in it was like March, April time, that sort of period, we actually purchased our first stocks in a segregated account that was dedicated to Stomaria. So we, instead of allocating a sizable amount of funds to purchase in, say, gold or silver or more merchandise, we set aside those funds and we invested in various stocks and shares. So the ones that come to mind are various airlines, so Delta Airlines, American Airlines, Tesla we bought, that would have been worth holding on to, and various other stocks that either paid monthly, quarterly, or annual dividends, or stocks that we thought were going to appreciate in value quite significantly in the future. And this did generate a small amount of revenue, but it obviously did mean that we had to tie up a sizable amount of funds that could otherwise be spent on the project itself. So as a long-term strategy, it is something I think that a lot of micronations might want to consider. There obviously is a large amount of risk with investing in anything, especially things like stocks and shares. But the long-term trend is likely to yield positive results if you leave funds there long enough. It's just dependent on whether or not you can leave your funds there for long enough to reap the rewards and not get too emotional about it when things start traveling south, which they very often do, especially in the last few years, especially in these times of uncertainty and doubt. So that is how we first started to try to mitigate our own financial contributions from the imperial family to Stomaria, was simply by allowing our supporters to contribute financially, which, you know, like I said, had the issue of being quite sporadic and unreliable. And secondly, we had stocks and shares in various companies, which paid us dividends on a regular basis. But that obviously meant that a large amount of finances were tied up in that account. So the next phase of our development, if you like, was the purchase of crypto assets or cryptocurrencies, depending on which way you want to call them, such as Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the rest of it. And these weren't a means of giving Stomaria a regular monthly income in the same way that dividend-paying stocks were, but we did eventually end up purchasing various other cryptocurrencies like ADA, Cardano, or Tron, which did pay not dividends, but staking rewards. I won't go into what exactly they are there, but they operate effectively the same way as a dividend payment if you purchase a dividend-paying stock. If you purchase some Cardano or Tron, then they would pay you on a monthly basis, I think it was, certainly where I invested the money, pay you a monthly rate, which is normally worked out at, I think, about 5 or 6% a year, so 0.5% a month, give or take, which is good. But again, the amount of money that you'd have to tie up into it is quite substantial, and the added risk, obviously, in cryptocurrencies, it's quite a new market, quite a young market, extremely volatile. I mean, even today, as I'm recording this video, we are currently experiencing crashes across the cryptocurrency board with losses of over 20% in some cases, including Cardano, I think. So that is obviously another factor that you have to consider. There is a lot of risk in putting money in these things, even though they can, in the long term, I think, produce positive results for you. And so the next phase, if you like, was us thinking, right, we don't want to hold large amounts of very volatile stocks or cryptocurrencies, because the yields that we're getting, even though they're quite regular, consistent, and reliable, the downside potential, the swings, there's a lot of risk there, and a lot of capital has to be tied up in that in order to make it worthwhile. And the GoFundMe campaign, the contributions that we got from our supporters while it was greatly appreciated, it was still very sporadic, hit and miss. We couldn't plan anything. We couldn't rely on a certain amount of donations coming in each month in order to fund certain projects that we had in mind. So the first thing we did was we scrapped the idea entirely of investing in the stock market and investing in cryptocurrencies. I personally do have a large amount of stocks and shares and cryptocurrencies, unfortunately, as of today, but it'll bounce back, I promise, it'll bounce back. But the other thing that we were trying to do was to get a more regular income from our supporters. So what we would do instead of a GoFundMe campaign is that we would set up a Patreon campaign. And this has the added benefit of not people necessarily making one-off contributions, financial contributions or donations or something like that. They would actually pay a monthly fee. And the way we basically worked this and worded it was that if you wanted to become a citizen of Stomaria, then you could voluntarily become a citizen of Stomaria, and as a result of becoming a citizen of Stomaria, there were certain taxes that you would have to pay. That's how we kind of sort of get around the sort of voluntary taxation aspect of Stomaria, and that we believe in contributing, you know, how much you want to the state, if you like, to Stomaria, to the project. And so we had various tiers, or 2 tiers more specifically, where you could become a citizen or a Stomarian noble. So you could choose between those, and then you could join that way. You become a citizen very easily that way, and it gave us an immediate and consistent revenue stream, which we could, to some degree or another, plan. In that, you know, even though people might come and go, more people might join one month and some people might leave another month, it is a relatively consistent stream of revenue that we have, despite it being quite small. So the next thing that we tried to do and were successful in doing was trying to monetize our YouTube channel. And again, for the same reasons, even though it is, you know, a little bit sporadic, it's a little bit hit and miss in terms of the amount of revenue that we generate each month, but it is still relatively consistent compared to what we had previously. And there's no risk involved in either of these ventures in terms of citizens contributing financially. We don't have to tie up, you know, thousands or tens of thousands of pounds in quite volatile assets in order to generate the same sort of revenue that our supporters can generate for us. In terms of the YouTube ads, all I need to do is post YouTube videos, which is what I do anyway. And, you know, some will be more successful than others, some will get more revenue generated on them than others, but, you know, it's risk-free. I don't have to invest anything except my time, which again is something that I do anyway. So if we can get a small amount of revenue, a small amount of funds directed to us through our activities on YouTube, then so much the better. And these funds, just while I think about it, these funds are all sent to a segregated bank account. So all the funds that we raise from GoFundMe, all the raise that we've raised through Patreon, all the funds that we've raised through YouTube, they have, or they will eventually go to a segregated bank account. It is still in my name, but the name of the account is Stomaria. And this is going to be our, I suppose, land purchase fund would be the best way to describe it. All the costs of the website, the merchandise, the you know, postage, the uniforms, everything like that, I will still be covering those costs. But as well as purchasing things like land, which we're hoping to do early in 2022. But this account for this land purchase, this is, I suppose, for additional territory, additional land that we will be purchasing in the future. So all the funds that are raised through Patreon and our YouTube monetized YouTube channel, among other sources, which I'll get to in a minute, are going to this segregated bank account, which will be used to purchase additional territory moving forward. So the next thing that we did, or the other thing that we did, was we started to sell merchandise. Now, we've not really promoted this as hard as we should have, and I think in the new year this is something that I am going to do, because we have sold a few items, but not through our Imperial market on our eBay account. I've actually sold them privately to supporters and citizens of Stomaria. But I think that is something I'm going to promote more heavily because it is eBay. I did want to go on eBay or something like a platform like that, just to give it a bit more legitimacy, to make people feel a bit more comfortable with it. You know, if they can just buy things from our website, there is obviously, you know, occasionally a question mark in people's minds, is like, is this legitimate? Is this, you know, a scam or whatever else? If I go through eBay, I mean, they obviously have things like refund policies and all the rest of it. So it's just a way of reassuring people. Another one we could have gone one was Etsy, but I did look at their terms and conditions, and the Etsy is more of like handmade craft sort of site, and even though a lot of our stuff is merchandise that is is obviously unique to Stomaria, it's not stuff that we have made ourselves. And a part of their policy, if I remember correctly, is that if you have just used a third party to design certain, you know, t-shirts or badges or whatever, and then put it on Etsy, that's not actually allowed, apparently. So we did go through eBay, a business account, and that I think at the moment costs us about £2.50 a month. But it's not really doing anything at the moment. And this is obviously something I want to change. So selling more merchandise through our eBay account, through our Imperial market, our online Imperial market, is something that I'm going to be pushing in the new year a bit harder, I think. And finally, as of the moment, the other thing that we're going to be doing to generate income is what I would probably define as real-world activities. Real-world economic activities, that is. Particularly in the Kingdom of Wayward. I have made a video about this before, about how we're going to be paying for trees to be taken down at the Kingdom of Wayward. They're going to log them, and we're going to sell the logs. And we also have livestock there, and I'm hoping to either sell the eggs once they're laying in spring, or to indeed breed the chickens and sell the chickens, and hopefully raise additional revenue that way. And again, those funds, because of the nature of those products, it will probably be cash in hand, but whether or not we set up like a petty cash tin or treasury, I suppose, or I deposit those funds directly into the bank account, I don't know yet. But either way, they obviously will be recorded, reported for tax purposes, if that is indeed applicable to those sorts of products. So again, everything we do is above board. Everything we do is legitimate and as transparent as we can make it, without, you know, giving away too much in the way of details regarding our own finances and financial position. And it's just a better way of doing it, because I dislike, you know, when Stomaria had, you know, £10,000-20,000 worth of stocks and shares and crypto assets and things like that, and then they skyrocketed in value over a short period of time in 2020, it did make me a bit anxious, because you know, the money initially that we put in to Stomaria in purchasing stocks and shares and all the rest of it, you know, some of it went up 200-400%. I mean, it was getting quite close to £100,000 before we sort of changed our approach a little bit. But the idea that the funds now that will be in the account will be coming in drips and drabs from our supporters and from economic activities that are specifically to do with Stomaria sits a lot more comfortably with me, because it doesn't put my finances out there. It doesn't put my personal holdings out there. I mean, I can keep myself to myself, and Stomaria can keep to itself as well. So yeah, that is the way that Stomaria is funded and will be funded going forward. If I do think of anything else, I will obviously post various other updates with regards to other streams of revenue. But I think that's about the long and the short of it. So if you wanted to become a citizen of Stomaria, then you can do so through our Patreon campaign, the link of which I shall leave in the description below as always. But otherwise, if you enjoyed the video, please feel free to give it a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll catch you in the next one.